Jasper Cole is a father on the edge, fighting to keep his daughter Emma against a system that threatens to tear them apart. Overworked and struggling, he's got 3 days to prove his worth. But when he helps two stranded women in a storm, an unexpected twist sets him on a path that could change everything. Hi, dearest viewer, if you're enjoying this story, a quick like or subscribe would be such a blessing. It helps me share more heartfelt stories with you. And if you don't mind, tell me where you're watching from. I read every single comment with a smile. Now, let us get back to the story. Jasper Cole's hands gripped the steering wheel with the kind of exhaustion that seemed to seep into his bones, dragging him down with every mile. It had been another brutal day, 16 hours of greasy mechanic work, and endless cups of coffee served to customers who barely noticed him. His car smelled of oil, and the stale scent of his second job, a bitter reminder of the life he was stuck in. His apartment, small and shabby, with peeling wallpaper and a refrigerator that hummed louder than it should, was the only place he could call home. But that home felt emptier each passing day. Jasper glanced at the clock on the dashboard. It was almost midnight. He had barely enough time to get to his small, second-floor apartment before he'd have to start the whole routine again tomorrow. Another shift at the auto shop, another shift at the coffee shop. He was barely keeping his head above water. But the financial struggles weren't the hardest part. No, the hardest part was the looming court date. His fingers tightened around the wheel as his mind drifted. 3 days. Only 3 days until the custody battle would decide his fate as a father. 3 days until the judge would decide whether his daughter, Emma, would stay with him or be sent to live with Claire, his ex-wife. Claire, who had given up on Emma once before, abandoning her when things got tough. Now, she was demanding full custody, citing Jasper's inability to provide the lifestyle Emma deserved. Jasper didn't have money. He didn't have a luxurious house or a well-paying job. But he had something Claire could never take from him. He had Emma. He had their bond, the bedtime stories, the weekend outings, the quiet moments at home where they laughed together, even if the furniture was old and the walls cracked. But that bond would be put to the test in the next few days. And deep down, despite all his pride and determination, Jasper was afraid. He was afraid that his financial struggles would be enough to convince the court that he wasn't a fit father. He feared they would look at his 2 jobs, his worn-out clothes, his constant tiredness, and deem him unworthy, unfit. His chest tightened at the thought. What if it wasn't enough? What if he couldn't keep Emma? The steady thrum of the engine was a harsh reminder of his reality. His life had become a series of endless shifts, always working, always tired, always wondering if it would be enough to hold on to her. He'd been doing this for years, sacrificing his own well-being for the one person who mattered most, Emma. His mind drifted back to the mornings spent rushing to make her breakfast before school, the nights when he read her stories before bed, even when he was so exhausted he could barely keep his eyes open. Emma deserved better, but Jasper was doing everything he could. His own needs, his health, his sleep came second. It was always about her, always. He had to believe it was enough, but right now the weight of the upcoming court hearing felt unbearable. The thought of losing her, of not being able to hold her close at night, of not hearing her laugh or seeing her eyes light up when she was excited, it shook him to the core. He pulled into the parking lot of his apartment complex, his heart pounding in his chest. It was past midnight, and the complex was quiet. The streetlights cast long, harsh shadows across the cracked pavement. Emma would be asleep by now. Mrs. Rachel, his neighbor, had been watching her tonight. He never liked leaving her with others, but work had a way of demanding everything from him, leaving him with little choice. He climbed the stairs to his apartment, his legs heavy. When he reached the door, he paused, listening. The faint sound of Emma's breathing through the door. A quiet comfort. Inside, the air smelled faintly of vanilla, Emma's favorite scent. The lamp beside the couch cast a soft glow across the room. And there she was, curled up on the couch, A blanket pulled tightly around her small frame. Mrs. Rachel was sitting in the armchair, flipping through a magazine. She looked up as he entered. "Thank you for watching her," Jasper said, his voice thick with gratitude. Mrs. Rachel smiled softly. "She waited up for you, but I think she finally drifted off." Jasper nodded and pulled out a $20 bill from his pocket. He handed it to her, but she waved it away. "Keep it. You need it more than I do." Her voice was gentle, the kindness in her eyes a reminder that, even in the midst of his struggles, there were people who still cared. "Thank you," he said again, his voice cracking slightly. Mrs. Rachel gave him a warm smile before leaving. He stood in the doorway, watching her go, feeling the weight of the world settling on his shoulders once again. The moment the door clicked shut, Jasper walked over to the couch. Emma stirred slightly, her little face scrunching in her sleep. He kneeled beside her, brushing her hair from her face. She opened her eyes slowly, her gaze unfocused at first. "Daddy," she mumbled. "I'm home, sweetheart," he whispered, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "I missed you," she mumbled, half asleep. "I missed you too, baby." She snuggled deeper into the couch, but then sat up, rubbing her eyes. "Daddy," she said, her voice small, filled with concern. "Are we going to be okay?" Jasper's heart broke at the question. Emma was only 6. She shouldn't have to worry about things like this. "We're going to be fine," he said, pulling her into a tight hug. It was a promise he wasn't sure he could keep, but he had to believe it. He had to make her believe it. "But Mommy says I might have to live with her, that you can't take care of me." Her words shattered in. His daughter, worried about being torn away from him. The one thing he'd worked his entire life for, the one thing that made every hardship worth it. Emma was being threatened. "No, sweetheart," he said softly. "Your mommy's wrong. I can take care of you. I will take care of you. No matter what happens in that courtroom, I'm your dad. And I love you more than anything in this world. I won't let anyone take you from me." Emma looked up at him, her big brown eyes filled with fear and uncertainty. "You won't," she whispered. "I promise. You won't be going anywhere. Not ever. We're in this together, okay?" She nodded slowly, and for a moment, the world seemed to quiet around them. But deep down, Jasper knew this fight wasn't over. He couldn't afford to lose Emma, not now, not ever. And in 3 days, everything would change. The thought of that courtroom, of a judge deciding his future as a father, gripped him with a fear he couldn't escape. But he couldn't give up. Not now. Not when he was so close to everything he loved. With Emma in his arms, he whispered once more, "I won't let anything take you from me, sweetheart. Not now, not ever." And he prayed that his promise would hold true. Jasper Cole's shift had stretched for what felt like an eternity. 16 hours of greasy hands, sore muscles, and the relentless hum of car engines. He had just finished up his last job at the coffee shop, and the world around him seemed to be closing in. He was exhausted physically, emotionally, mentally. The weight of his looming court battle hung like a cloud over his every step. He only had 3 days left. His worn shoes clicked against the wet pavement as he headed to his beat-up Honda Civic, barely keeping his eyes open. The rain had started to pour in sheets as he stepped outside. It wasn't the light drizzle that came and went. This was the kind of storm that soaked you through in minutes, turning the streets into rivers. The rain was relentless, hammering against his clothes, his face, the world around him. He sighed and pulled his jacket tighter, already feeling the cold seep into his bones. He didn't have the energy to fight it, to battle the downpour, the fatigue, or the reality of his situation. His eyes were barely focused as he climbed into the car. The warmth of the seat a fleeting comfort. He was so tired, so drained, but his thoughts kept returning to Emma. The thought of losing her in 3 days was a knife lodged in his chest. He didn't want to let her go. Not to Claire. Not after all he had done for her, all he had sacrificed. As the rain hammered against the windshield, Jasper's hand brushed the steering wheel, and his mind began to wander. The car sputtered to a stop. He blinked. The headlights illuminated the scene before him, two young women standing by a black Mercedes, drenched in rain. Their expensive clothes clung to their skin, their faces set in a look of helplessness. They looked like they didn't belong in a place like this. And yet, here they were stranded, stuck in the storm. Jasper's heart twisted. He didn't want to stop. He didn't have time to help. But something in their eyes, their desperation, pulled at him. It was the same look he'd seen in Emma's eyes when she was scared, when she was vulnerable. Without thinking, he pulled the car over. The tires screeched as they hit the wet pavement, sending a splash of water toward the girls. He shut off the engine and got out, the rain soaking him instantly. "Car trouble," he yelled over the storm. One of the twins, the taller one with dark hair, looked up at him with a mix of surprise and gratitude. "Yes, we've been here for over an hour and no one stopped." Her voice was small, barely audible over the howling wind, but there was a quiet desperation behind it that made Jasper pause. "Are you okay?" he asked, his eyes scanning their expensive car, a vehicle that probably cost more than he made in 5 years. "We're fine," the other girl replied, her voice trembling. "Just stranded. No phone, no one will help." She hugged herself tighter, her clothes clinging to her frame. Jasper nodded, glancing at the Mercedes once more. "I'll take a look at it." The engine was still warm when he popped the hood, and the rain pelted his face as he leaned over to inspect it. He didn't expect much. He had worked on cars like this before, but this one was too new to fancy. Still, his instincts kicked in. It didn't take long to spot the issue. The battery terminals were corroded, a loose connection. Nothing major, but it would need a jump or a tow. "It's the battery," he called out to them. "It's not going anywhere without a jump, maybe a tow." The two girls exchanged worried glances, but neither said anything at first. Finally, the one with the dark hair stepped closer. "We can call our dad," she said, but her voice lacked confidence. "He's probably busy, though." "He's always busy." Jasper's heart clenched. He knew that tone. The defeat, the acceptance, the kind of look he'd seen in Emma's eyes when she needed him most, and he wasn't there. "You're not going anywhere tonight," he said, his voice steady despite his own weariness. "But there's a hotel a few miles away. You can wait there while I get you a tow in the morning." They both hesitated. There was something about their expression, something Jasper couldn't quite place. It wasn't just the gratitude. It was as though they had become so accustomed to people not helping, to being ignored, that they didn't know how to react when someone did. "Do you really think it's okay?" the other girl asked, her voice quieter, almost hesitant. "I wouldn't offer if I didn't think so," Jasper replied, offering a smile. It was small, but it was enough. They grabbed their bags from the back of the car and Jasper led them to his Honda. The girls climbed in shivering, their clothes drenched from the rain. The car's interior smelled faintly of stale coffee and grease, but they didn't complain. They just looked relieved. Jasper drove carefully through the rain, his eyes focused on the road as the wipers struggled to keep up. The girls didn't speak at first, and he didn't mind. The silence felt comfortable, like they were all just trying to make it through the storm, each of them fighting their own battles. Finally, the girl in the passenger seat spoke. "I'm Sophie," she said, her voice soft, but polite. "And this is my sister Maya." "Jasper," he said, his hands tight on the wheel. The headlights illuminated the road in a pale glow, but the storm still raged, obscuring everything else. "Thank you for stopping," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Most people just drive past." Jasper glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "People are scared these days," he said. "Can't blame them." "But you stopped," Sophie added, her tone a little softer now. "You didn't just drive past." Jasper's chest tightened. He hadn't meant to stop. He didn't have time for this. He had a court case in 3 days, and his daughter's future was at risk. But there was something in their eyes, something in their faces that made him remember why he fought so hard for Emma, why he sacrificed everything, every day, to make sure she felt safe, loved, and protected. "I have a daughter," Jasper said quietly, his eyes on the road. If she were out here, I'd hope someone would stop for her. There was a moment of silence in the car. A heavy, uncomfortable silence. Finally, Maya spoke. "What's her name?" "Emma," Jasper replied, his voice a little hoarse. "She's 6. "That's beautiful," Sophie said softly. "Do you see her often?" Jasper felt a lump form in his throat, but he fought it back. "Every chance I get," which might not be for much longer. Sophie and Maya exchanged a glance. The atmosphere shifted. There was a quiet understanding in their eyes. "Our dad is like that," Maya said, her voice tinged with bitterness. "Always working, always too busy." "Yeah," Sophie added quietly. "We barely see him. He's got all the money in the world, but we'd trade it all just to have him around, to have dinner with him without him checking his phone every 5 minutes. Jasper didn't answer right away. He thought about the contrast between his own struggles and the girls' frustrations with their father. Their father, a man of wealth and power, who was absent despite his ability to provide. "It sounds lonely," Jasper said softly. "It is," Sophie admitted. "Money doesn't fix loneliness. It just makes it more comfortable." Jasper's thoughts drifted to Emma. He was fighting for her, yes. But he was also fighting to be the kind of father who was there for her, the kind of father who could give her something that money could never buy. As they pulled into the hotel parking lot, Sophie turned to him. "Thank you," she said, "for stopping. Really, you didn't have to, but you did." Jasper nodded. "It's no trouble." The girls grabbed their bags and prepared to leave, but before they went inside, Sophie hesitated, her voice soft. "I hope the judge sees what we see, that you're exactly the kind of father Emma needs." Jasper's chest tightened. He hadn't thought about the connection between their situation and his own. But now, as the storm raged around them, he realized something deep within him. No matter how hard it got, no matter how much he had to fight, he wouldn't stop. Not for her, not for Emma. And that was the beginning. Jasper Cole couldn't escape the weight that pressed against his chest as he sat in his car, parked in front of his modest apartment. The world around him was quiet save for the distant hum of traffic and the rustle of wind through the trees. But inside, he was anything but calm. The papers for the custody hearing were clenched tightly in his hand, the final step in what felt like an endless battle. 3 days, that's all he had left. 3 days until the judge would decide whether Emma would stay with him or go live with Claire, his ex-wife, who had always believed her money could secure her anything, even her daughter. Jasper looked down at the papers again, running his fingers over the stark, official text. Claire's lawyer was already prepared to tear him apart. He had no doubt. They were going to point out his long hours, his second job, his inability to provide a luxurious lifestyle. Claire had already made sure to paint him as an unfit father, someone who worked too much to care for his daughter. The lawyer would try to convince the court that Emma would be better off with someone who could give her everything she needed: financial stability, luxury, a future with ease. Jasper swallowed hard as his thoughts drifted back to Emma. He remembered the first time he held her in his arms. How small and fragile she had felt against him. The way her little hand had wrapped around his finger. How her tiny breaths had calmed him in ways nothing else ever had. She was his world, and he would never forget the promise he made to always protect her, to be there for her no matter what. The memory of Emma's smile, her laugh, the way she clung to him at night when nightmares woke her up, those moments reminded him of everything he was fighting for. But those memories were now clouded with the looming fear that they might be ripped from him. His heart clenched at the thought of someone else raising her, someone else teaching her how to ride a bike or helping her with school projects. The thought of not being there when she needed him the most filled him with a kind of terror he hadn't felt in years. Jasper's hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. The exhaustion from his long hours at the auto shop and coffee shop, combined with the emotional toll of the custody battle, was starting to take its toll. He had never felt more alone, more powerless. But he couldn't afford to give up. He couldn't let go of Emma. He closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath, trying to steady himself. It wasn't just about the court date. It was about showing Emma that love wasn't measured by the size of a paycheck or the house you lived in. It was measured by presence, by sacrifice, by the little things, the bedtime stories, the weekend hikes, the small moments of connection. He had to believe that was enough. It had to be. But the countdown was almost over. 3 days, the thought of facing the courtroom, with Claire sitting on the other side with her perfect life, her perfect lawyer, it made his stomach turn. But then a thought hit him like a punch to the gut. What if the judge who would decide his fate was someone he knew? What if this wasn't just any judge, but someone whose decisions could change the course of his entire life? Jasper's breath caught in his throat. It couldn't be. But then it clicked. A flash of recognition. The mention of Maya and Sophie's father during their brief conversation replayed in his mind. Their distant tone when they spoke about him, how they described his high-powered career. He hadn't thought much of it at the time. He hadn't connected the dots. But now the pieces fell into place. One by one, Harold Finch. The name hit him like a thunderclap. Harold Finch was the wealthy, powerful father of Maya and Sophie, the girls he had helped just a few days ago. The girls who had stood stranded in the storm, waiting for someone to help them. The same girls whose father was now the judge presiding over his custody case. Jasper's chest tightened, his head spinning. The small act of kindness he had shown them, the decision to stop and help them despite his exhaustion, could it backfire? What if Harold Finch held a grudge against him for helping his daughters? What if this twist of fate, this chance encounter, would ruin everything he had worked for? Would he see it as a betrayal? Or would he see it as an act of selflessness? The questions spiraled in Jasper's mind. What had he gotten himself into? Was this really the moment when everything he had been fighting for would be lost? The fear gnawed at him. He had tried to stay focused on the positive, to believe that doing the right thing would lead to the right outcome. But now, he wasn't so sure. He felt a sense of impending doom hanging over him. What if Harold Finch's personal involvement in this case led to his downfall? Jasper leaned back in his car seat, trying to steady his breathing. He couldn't afford to lose focus now. The court date was in 3 days, and there was nothing he could do to change the situation except face it head-on. He had to trust that his love for Emma would be enough, even if Harold Finch's opinion was clouded by personal bias. But the doubt, the fear, was like a storm inside him, one that no amount of self-assurance could calm. His internal conflict was consuming him. Every moment felt like a test. Could he keep his head in the game, even with all this uncertainty swirling around him? With a deep breath, he gripped the steering wheel once more. He had to face this. He had to face Harold Finch, the judge who could save or destroy him. He couldn't let fear rule him. Not now. Not with Emma on the line. 3 days. Jasper took one last look at the court papers in his hands and steeled himself for what was coming. Whatever happened, he couldn't back down now. He was all Emma had left, and he would fight for her no matter what. The courtroom was suffocating. Jasper could feel the weight of every pair of eyes on him, the heat from the packed room pressing in like a vice. He sat rigidly at the defendant's table, hands clasped together to keep from fidgeting, every muscle in his body tense with anxiety. The lawyer from Claire's side was speaking, his voice smooth and cold as he relentlessly painted Jasper as an unfit father. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," the lawyer began, his tone calculated, "we have here a man who works long hours, who barely makes ends meet, and who cannot provide the kind of stable, secure home that Emma deserves. His life is consumed by work, leaving no room for the emotional needs of his daughter. The truth is, Emma deserves a future where she is cared for, loved, and, most importantly, present with a father who can offer her stability. Unfortunately, Jasper Cole is not that father." The words stung. Jasper's heart hammered in his chest as he listened to the damning words. He could feel his throat tighten, but he couldn't speak. He could only sit there, helpless, as Claire's lawyer detailed all of his supposed failings. The accusations were sharp and piercing. Every word painted him as a failure, a father who loved his daughter, but not enough to sacrifice for her. And those accusations were all too familiar. Jasper's eyes flickered to Emma where she was sitting, her small figure hunched over slightly, as if trying to make herself invisible. Her wide eyes, so full of innocence, locked onto him. He could feel her disappointment from across the room. It cut deeper than any words. The lawyer didn't stop. Jasper's work consumes him. He spends so much time away from Emma that it's clear he's unable to fulfill the role of a present, attentive father. He works tirelessly, not for love, but for necessity. Emma deserves a future with a father who is there for her, a father who can meet her emotional and physical needs. And that man is not Jasper Cole. Every word felt like it chipped away at Jasper's last shred of hope. How could they not understand? He worked these long hours because he loved Emma more than anything. His sacrifices weren't out of neglect, they were out of necessity. He wanted to provide for her. He was doing it all for her future. But in this room, in this battle for Emma's future, none of that mattered. All they saw was a man who worked too much and loved too little. Just as the weight of despair threatened to consume him, Jasper's own lawyer, Eleanor Carter, stood up. She was a tall woman, poised and confident, with dark hair pulled into a tight bun. Her expression was calm, but there was a fire in her eyes. She wasn't going to let the lawyer from Claire's side bury Jasper without a fight. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Eleanor began, her voice clear and steady, "what we have here today is a man who has worked tirelessly, not for luxury, but for love. He works 2 jobs, sometimes 3, just to ensure his daughter has everything she needs. But I ask you, what does a father need to give to prove his love? Is it the size of his paycheck? Is it the time he has, or the time he doesn't? Or is it the simple act of showing up every day, doing the best he can, even when things are hard?" Eleanor's words struck like a hammer. Jasper's heart, which had been heavy and weighed down by guilt, began to lift. Eleanor continued, her voice gaining strength. "Jasper Cole has been working to make sure Emma's life is better than his. He has made sacrifices for her future, not because he doesn't care, but because he cares more than anyone else in this room. Let's be clear, Jasper is not a perfect man. No father is. But he has shown up for Emma, and that is what matters most. He is present in her life. He is there. He's not perfect, but he is hers, and that's what matters." Jasper's chest tightened with emotion. Finally, someone was telling the truth. Eleanor understood him. She understood what he was trying to do, the lengths he had gone to for Emma. Emma needs love. She needs consistency, safety, and a father who can offer those things. And no amount of money, no matter how much wealth or luxury, can replace that. What matters is showing up for her, being there when she needs you. Eleanor paused and looked directly at the jury, her eyes piercing. Jasper Cole has shown up. He has sacrificed. He has been there. And that is why he deserves to be Emma's father. The room went silent after Eleanor finished. Jasper felt a glimmer of hope, but it was fleeting. Harold Finch, who had been sitting in his judge's seat silently throughout the arguments, now cleared his throat. His gaze shifted between the defense and the prosecution, his face unreadable. "I have heard both sides of this case." Harold's deep voice rang through the room. "I have listened to the arguments and the testimonies. But the truth, as I see it, is that this case is about more than just a paycheck. It's about being present for your children, showing them love and care in ways that don't always come with a price tag." Jasper's pulse quickened. This was it, the moment that could change everything. Harold leaned forward, his fingers tapping lightly on the desk in front of him. "Jasper Cole has not been a perfect father. He has made mistakes, and he has struggled. But what matters here is what Emma needs. What she needs is not wealth. She needs a father who is present, who loves her, who works not for luxury, but for the future of his daughter. I am here today Not as the judge presiding over this case, Harold began, looking directly at Jasper, but as a father. Jasper felt a rush of disbelief. What was happening? This was the last thing he had expected. Harold Finch, the man who had everything, was stepping forward in his defense. "I've been listening to the arguments presented here," Harold continued, his gaze sweeping across the courtroom, "and what I've heard so far concerns me greatly. What this case is really about isn't money. It isn't about status or how much time a father spends working to provide. It's about being present for your children. That's what truly matters." The words sank into Jasper's chest. Harold Finch was speaking out, but he wasn't speaking about his own wealth, his influence, or his power. He was speaking as a father. "I've been a father who's failed to be there," Harold admitted, his voice steady but filled with a quiet vulnerability. "I've spent so much time building my empire, making money, thinking that's what my daughters needed. But what I didn't realize was that they needed me. They needed my presence, my love. I've neglected that. But when I look at Jasper, when I see how he sacrifices everything, not for luxury, but for love, I realize that what matters isn't how much money he makes. It's how he shows up every day." Jasper could hardly believe what he was hearing. Harold Finch, a man who had everything, had just admitted to his own shortcomings as a father, and now he was standing up for Jasper, a man who had nothing but his love for his daughter. "Maya and Sophie told me about their experience with Jasper," Harold continued, his tone unshaken, his gaze still fixed on Jasper. "They spoke about his kindness, about how he helped them when no one else would. It wasn't a grand gesture, it was simple. He stopped in the rain to help two strangers. But it spoke volumes about his character." The courtroom remained silent. Jasper could barely breathe. Harold Finch, the man who had everything, was now speaking about him, the man with nothing, about his kindness, his love, his sacrifices for Emma. "I failed as a father. I focused on my work, thinking it was the right thing to do. But I wasn't there when my daughters needed me. And now, seeing Jasper, seeing how he has given everything for Emma, I see that what she needs is not a rich father, but a present father." Harold Finch's words hit Jasper like a punch to the chest. This was the moment. This was the validation he needed. Harold Finch, the man who had it all, had just acknowledged what Jasper had known all along: the value of being there. "Jasper Cole is not perfect, but he has shown up. He has worked hard not to provide luxury, but to provide love. And that, Your Honor, is what Emma needs. That is what matters." Jasper's chest swelled with emotion as Harold spoke. His words were a lifeline. Hearing a man of Harold's stature say those things made everything feel more real. Emma will thrive in an environment where she is shown love, stability, and dedication. That is what Jasper has provided. And for that reason, I am awarding full custody to Jasper Cole. Jasper's breath caught in his throat as the judge's gavel rang out. Emma was staying with him. She wasn't going anywhere. As the tension in the courtroom slowly began to dissipate, Harold Finch remained seated, his eyes scanning the room, still processing everything that had unfolded. Jasper, still in shock, stood up slowly, unsure of what to do next. He felt a tap on his shoulder. Turning, he saw Harold Finch approaching him. Harold's expression softened, his face no longer as stern as it had been during the trial. "Thank you," Harold said quietly. His voice carried a rare sincerity, an unspoken recognition. "You did what I couldn't. I should have been there for my daughters. But you showed up." Jasper nodded, still unable to fully grasp the enormity of what had just happened. For the first time in weeks, he felt a sense of relief. The weight on his shoulders, the crushing fear of losing Emma, was gone. Harold smiled faintly, his tone lightening. "Maya and Sophie, they would like to thank you properly. They've asked if you and Emma would join us for dinner." Jasper's mind swirled. The act of kindness, the simple decision to help Harold's daughters when they were stranded, had led to this moment. Harold Finch, the man with everything, was now offering a connection that could change everything. Thank you for following Jasper's inspiring journey as a single dad. His story is a powerful reminder that no matter the obstacles, a father's love and dedication can change everything. If you've ever felt like your circumstances were against you, remember, it's the love you give and the sacrifices you make that truly define your path. Take a moment to reflect. Have you ever made a choice for your child that changed everything, or stepped up when you felt uncertain? If Jasper's story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and comment below. And if you want more stories of fatherhood, love, and second chances, hit that subscribe button. Together, let's inspire others and prove that with love, anything is possible.